today we're going to be talking about the mortgage pre-approval process. Let's go over it in detail. Let's talk about what potential first-time home buyers can do to put themselves in that best position possible to qualify for a home today or 6 months from now. It's a great topic, Paul. Thanks for being
Absolutely,
here.
yes. So as you mentioned here, pre-approvals. I mean, it's a hot topic right now in particular because in this market, let's be honest, you go to open house on a weekend, you like a property, you need to be pre-approved. If you're not pre-approved, then it's almost impossible to get your offer in on time to get your, to have a chance of getting this house. I mean, you have to be ready prior to the showing. And I would imagine, Emilio, anyone you take to an open house, you want to make sure they have their financing in place, I would assume.
Regardless of the market, if it's a fast-paced market, if it's a slow market, we will not take buyers out unless they're pre-approved for several reasons.
What does a pre-approval consist of? What is it? What do we do? What is the process? So with the pre-approval, essentially the first step with any particular, prospective buyer, we sit down, we have a conversation about their needs, their wants, where they're at right now. We look at their whole picture. We run their credit first. That's key. Credit scores, ideally, you need to be 600 plus. If you're not quite there yet, I give you a game plan of what you need to do to get there. Build credit or maybe pay some credit cards down, whatever it may be. So first is credit. The second step in the process is, looking at income and down payment assets. So with income now, I mean, being a first-time home buyer in particular, maybe most people don't realize what it takes to qualify for a mortgage. So what I do is I read either your tax returns if you're self-employed. If you're a salary or an hourly worker, I look at W-2s. Typically want to see 2 years worth of work history. One thing I always mention to first-time home buyers in particular is if you want to buy a home, please don't make any drastic changes prior to, meaning changing professions, maybe, with taking out significant debt, maybe buying a new car, things like that you want to stay away from initially. You don't want to have any new credit activity prior to getting a home, ideally. So that's something else. So the credit income is huge. The next component would be down payment. Now, keep in mind, depending on the program you go with, there are some down payment assistance programs in Rhode Island, for example, the Rhode Island Housing Grant, which is $17,500. It's something that most first-time home buyers want to take advantage of. It's still available right now. We're hearing it might not be there much longer, but for the time being, it's still available until the funds are depleted. So with that program, you get the money from the state, the $17,500, which is non-refundable. But if that program doesn't work for you, meaning, your credit score is not high enough, or maybe the income doesn't work, there are other programs available, such as FHA, first-time home buyer, 3.5% down. Again, this program is more for people with multifamilies or single families as well. 3.5% down for that. It's also conventional. So that's something that when we look at income, when I look at down payment, when I look at, your assets, if you have money in the bank, reserves for, retirement funds, I can determine what program makes most sense for you. And most home buyers fall in that category, either FHA, conventional, Rhode Island Housing. Those are the most common first-time home buyer programs. So anyone I speak to, we go through the whole process. And as we go through it, I explain why we're asking for documentation. And so when I give a pre-approval letter, that means I vetted the client. I ran the findings, which is called underwriting findings, to make sure that they're eligible. And then the letter is usually credit's good for 120 days. When I give a letter, I say 30 days in the letter. The reason being is rates change all the time. So if things are tight and you got pre-approved back in August, maybe you want to revisit now because things are a little bit different. So that's why it's technically 30-day letters, and we go, for 4 months though on the initial credit pull. So I mean that's a pre-approval process. Once I give you a letter, it allows you to put an offer on a house right away. And my goal is, if you're not ready yet, I get you where you need to be. But I don't give letters out like they're candy. I mean, I can't just say, oh, you need a letter. Well, you need to make sure that numbers work, because the last thing you want to do with pre-approval is give you a letter, and then all of a sudden you put an offer in, and now the financing isn't good, or it falls apart last minute. Or at the end of the day, that's the last thing we want to do.